Alright, so we're going to touch on the NT01 here. So this screen here is going to be very similar as well to our Titan terminal for Gleaner guys, and as well for the Ideal on the GPS section. We're first just going to cover a couple things on the tractor side, just our teaching sequence here first. So that's going to be our go and ends. So we'll get that icon by clicking on the tractor here, and then this icon here. And then this is our go and end sequence, and similar to how Gary had it there with the Fendt 1, we can go in and edit, or we can play and record, and just as we play out our sequence on there, it'll record it and go through. Otherwise, we can also just edit it offline here, and we can go ahead and configure it however we may need. So if we want our auto steer engage in here, we can turn on our auto steer, and then it'll engage 8 feet after, let's say, we raise our 3-point hitch. Or with these icons here, we can adjust the sequence and add new ones in afterwards. Then we can also go ahead and delete as we're going through. And then on the top here, we can go ahead and we can pick which sequence we actually want to edit. So if it's our end one here, the orange is what we're changing. So we were editing our end one, we can also do our go to or end two at any time. And then once we're done, we're going to hit this back arrow here, and that'll allow us to apply the changes, and then we'll have our sequence saved in here, and we can go ahead and use it. Once we have our sequence saved in here, then we can go back. Oh, we'll just do a little adjustment there. We can go back to our main home screen here, and we'll just go through our GPS setup here. So we'll click on the icon once. You see here that it changes just this quadrant, and then if we click on into secondary time, we get to pull up into the half screen here, which is our Vario Guide main menu. So just to run through these icons here on the side here, so this is our field selection, and we can run through some setup in there. This is our implement, so we can go through and change all our implement settings. Here's our steering settings. We'll just go through and adjust some steering. This is our anything to do with our receiver settings. And then this tractor here is actually unlocked with the headland management. So we'll have auto teach-in, which will play out our teach-in sequence as we reach the boundary, as well as the auto turnaround. So we're not going to get too in-depth into those. We can touch on those as a one-on-one or in an advanced session there. And then this here is our auto remark. So if anybody has any time where they're running with their planter and they find that anytime they engage the auto steer, it's shifting their planter as they're turning around, we're going to want to make sure that that's off. So what that does is that just anytime you engage the auto steer, it'll re-center the line to where the center of the tractor is. So if you're halfway through a turn, it's going to shift your line over to where you're sitting. So that's one thing you'll want to make sure it's off. It's just a handful of sections there that you actually really utilize that. So just to touch up from the top here, we'll go into our fields. So we can create a new field here, or select an existing field from our list here. So we'll go ahead and create a new one. So we can label this one field 2. And then it'll automatically pull up if we want to run through a task. We can brief on that in a minute here. And then as we run through this icon here, if we click on that, it'll pull up the secondary page. So this has a find field feature. So if we have a boundary preset in our fields ahead of time, we can just use this little field locator and it'll give us the direction. Or on top here, we'll if we have that on, then it'll have our auto field detection. So as we drive into the field, it automatically populates on the screen if we want to make that active, and then goes through our tasks. So just to kind of save a couple menu jumps there, or if you have some operators who aren't 100% familiar with your naming sequence, it kind of saves some time there. They just pull into the field and it streamlines it for them there. So we can go back. This icon here, we'll make a boundary here in a second here, but this is to create a new boundary. And then this here is for your guidance lines, to create new guidance lines or select guidance lines that are in the field there already. Then if we scroll down, we can also create new obstacles and markers there. And then any worked area that we have, our coverage mapping that's in our field, we can delete that here, and we can delete just our current field, or we can delete all the layers for all the fields here as well. So then to go back to our main menu there, we'll go to our implement setup. So here we can have, we'll create a new implement. So on the top here, we can use that icon to create a new. This one has a front 3-point hitch, so we can pick either if we want a front 3-point or a rear implement. Then we can pick from our list here of different implements. So we have 3-point hitch mounted, which is just a solid 3-point hitch. A 3-point hitch semi-mounted would be an example would be like a 2-point mount for a planter. So you still have a trail type planter, but it's mounted using the 2-point. And then we have a regular drawbar, clevis coupling, and a ball coupling hitch. So we'll just go through and we'll do a drawbar planer here. We'll just call this our test implement here. So now it'll take us to our implement settings page on here. So at the top here we'll have our name, then we'll have our hitch coupling, so we can edit that if we need to in the future. And then we also have this icon here, which is for a steered axle or a rigid axle. So since this would be a planter, we'd want to make sure this is a rigid axle, and as Josh kind of touched on earlier there, for a steered axle it'd mainly be a couple manure tankers, that sort of thing along those lines. So once we have our implement set up here, then we can go ahead and go down to our implement measurements. So we'll make our overall working width, so we can call this a 30-foot. So it's a 30-foot implement there. And then we have our two measurements here. So this one here is from our coupling to where our wheels would contact the ground there for our reference point. So that's going to be where we're doing our turning point there. And then this measurement here is going to be from our distance back from our coupling point to either where the planter would engage into the ground, or sprayer, the application point would be your boom width there. So we can just set up a generic 15 feet here and 15 feet here. And then this center distance here is going to be for our offsets. So this here is only going to adjust on the right hand side of the implement. So if we have an offset, let's say a trail disc mower or anything hanging off to the one side there, we'll go ahead and adjust this. Now if it's a right hand offset, we're going to increase this measurement. And what that's going to do is that's going to shift this implement here over to the right by increasing this distance. If it's a left hand offset, we're actually going to decrease this measurement here, and that's going to shift the implement towards the left. Versus if it's a center trail type and it's trailing behind you, you're just going to leave this at half a width here, and that'll keep it centered. Then we can go ahead and once we got that set, we can go through our coverage. So this icon here, if it's on the eye here, it's just an on all the time. It'll always paint coverage behind you. If it's on auto, then it'll work based on your different triggers that you have set here. So you can see we got a 3-point hitch, a PTO, our remote valves, a whisker switch or an auxiliary switch, and then our auto steer here to have triggers. We can also have more than one trigger on as well. So if we want auto steer and remote valves, we can have. But if you have more than one, you'll need all of the triggers that you have set here on in order to start coverage. So we'll just do only our remote valves here for, let's say, our lift and lower. So here we will choose the color remote that we are connected to for our lift and lower. So we'll choose red. And then we'll start the coverage when we lower the implement, which will be the negative symbol here. And then we'll stop when we raise the implement, which would be the positive symbol. So that'll be our coverage. And then this icon here is actually for your setup for your auto turn. So just with this one having the auto turn feature, then we can go ahead and we can set up just our distance to turn around for our radius there. So we'll touch on that in a different session here. So now that'll bring us back to our implement selection page once we have that set. So you'll see here on the top we have our working width, our overlap, and our path to path distance. So our working width is going to be what the actual application width is, and that this little notebook here symboling is that's what's going to be recording our acreage. So we're going to record our acreage based on a 30-foot implement. And then we can add an overlap in here. So if we're planting, we're not going to have any overlap, but if we're cultivating, we may put in a 6-inch overlap in there. So we can add that in this icon. And then our path to path distance here is just showing that from the center line of this way line to the next one is going to be a 30-foot difference. So then here you can see here we have our test implement implemented behind our tractor. Here is our number 1. We can have up to 3 implements on here, 1 on the front or 2 on the rear, and we can just select those from our menu here to pick up a different implement. So now our options on here, so if we wanted to go ahead and edit anything in our implement, if we needed to change the width for any reason, we can go ahead, and each one of these wrenches here with the implement is the symbolized settings for that current implement. So this one here would line up with our test implement, so we need to edit, we would go here. Otherwise, same as for the front implement and same for the rear implement. So that just brings us back to this page here for our measurements. This icon here, what it symbolizes for is that is changing your reference point for your steering. So if we click on it, I can show you here. So we have our different features here. So we have auto, which will toggle between them. We have rear implement number 1, which is set to manual. So this will allow our reference point to only be on the first implement behind the tractor and manually stay on that. So as we kind of it'll allow the tractor to oversteer on our curved head lanes to maintain that implement on the way line as best it calculates. Or we can choose just the tractor, which would be our rear axle as our fixed point, and then it'll just maintain the tractor on there. So if we have more than one implement, which I can show you here, so if we choose another implement here, then as we go in here we can pick to have a different implement. So if you had an air seeder, let's say, if it's a pull type cart that's in between, you'll want to have it set on your implement number 2, as that's where your air seeder will be, and you'll keep that air seeder on the line as best, and ignore the cart in between and your tractor to overcompensate for that turn there. So that's our implement selection page there. Oh, and then also just a note here, this implement offset, that's going to tell us how far we are offset on there. So if you you'll want to keep that at 0 if you're anything trailed behind you, but if you do need to set that off, that'll just give you the total that you have it offset there. And then that'll take us down to our steering settings here. So this just gives us a little preview here. We can adjust our steering settings as well as enable fast steer up top here. And this here just allows the auto takeover for steering sensitivity. So just as you're shifting through the line there, it may fine-tune some adjustments on your steering settings to kind of compensate for any slosh and liquid tanks or anything that may adjust it there. So then now to go to our settings here, we'll click on that icon. So this will bring up our system checklist. So everything checklist here is what we'll need to actually engage auto steer. So just kind of brief quick checklist of what we need to engage. So the only 2 X's here we have, or 3 X's, is our forward or reverse speed, and then this just symbolizes that we don't have a weight line in here, and then our steering. So we'll run through these icons here. So first is going to be anything to do with our receiver settings. So if we click on that, this is where it lets us know we have our satellite receiver. So this is going to be our model. We're set to RTK here, and then we have a couple settings on here. If we want to change this just with RTK, we actually hang up the phone here, and then that allows us to change these settings, and then we can go in and choose our signal type, whether we're running WAS, range point, or center point, RTX, and our different RTKs. So we can run through in there and then just connect back with our RTK in here. And then these here are just for your different settings. Since this is RTK, we can change our cell settings and our RTK NT01, which is just your credentials to log in to your RTK there. This icon here is going to be for our satellite, so if we need to know our longitude, latitude, or altitude, as well as if we do ask how many satellites you're connected to, if you need to know just what the reception is, you can kind of click on there and get an idea how many satellites you're connected to and used, as well as your accuracies in here. Then we can go down here. This is going to give us any information related to do with the actual receiver itself. So our serial number here, which is going to be big for if we're going to be renewing subscriptions, we'll want to know your serial number, as well as if you're making any different receiver upgrades on there. And it'll also tell you what your accuracy level is here, so that'll tell us what kind of unlocks you have in your receiver already. And this is also the screen where we can manually input any codes that we may give you. Otherwise, we'll send them via an over-the-air unlock there. This is where we can get into our gyros on the next one here. So this is, as Rob was talking about earlier, if we have, if we do find in the rare case that our tractor is not tracking on the same tracks here, we can go ahead and click on this icon here, and it'll run us through our track and track calibration, or and then reset our 00 if our mounting, if our receiver mounting changes. On here now, the next one is our NEMA. So this is going to be for if we have an external terminal or a planter monitor, then we can export our GPS settings and our position from our variable guide terminal to whatever other auxiliary terminal we're going to have. So we're just going to set up our different formats there, and we're going to enable it over here. And then this here is just to export our GPS data. So if we have any logs or issues there, then we may get you to export it there onto a USB stick just for some further diagnostics. So that'll take care of the system page here. And then now if we go back into our Vario Guide main menu, these two here, we'll just take a quick look at them. These are for your teach-in settings, so your headland settings you can set based on your boundary there, where you can activate your teach-in sequences, as well as set up for your auto turn there at the end there. So that's the main menu there. If we go back to here, we can see here our different icons, which I can kind of show you once we have an AB line in here, but this will be our remark feature, so we can center the line based on where we're currently sitting, as well as we can input our nudge offsets and then whether we want to nudge left or right. And then this icon here, we can save it. So if we do want to double back with some soybeans afterwards and save our line there, we can save it here, as well as reset if we want to go back to our original AB line there. So that's kind of the just for the Vario Guide there. We can get into our task control here as well. So our task control, we'll click it once, it'll change this quadrant here. We click it a second time to pull up into our half page for our settings. So this will be for keeping track of your coverage for an acre counter, or if you're running prescriptions or anything for there, you can also add in here. So we can manually select a new task here, and we can call this planting. And then we can enter check mark. And then now it'll run through, it'll tell us what our implements are that we're connected to. And then we can also add in additional features if we need to. Otherwise it will be assigned to our field there. And then once we have that added on, we can hit our record button up here. And then you'll see in our map screen here, we'll get a little record symbol. That means we're actively keeping tally. And then we can keep track of our acreage that we've used, our time, our fuel usage, our depth usage, anything that we want to record on there. And then once we're done our task, or once we're done the field that we're running in, we can save our task by hitting this floppy disk and check mark, and that'll give us a summary of everything that we've used in that field there, and then we can save it. And then this one here just saves it with an auxiliary copy, so if you need to repeat that, go back in another application, it just saves it with another blank slate to select later. So we'll just go ahead and save it here, and then that's for our task. In here we have our task handling settings. So this is if we're going to be exporting our tasks via USB or with a Bluetooth connection. So if we do have a Vario Dock Pro and we're exporting it to a different program for looking at our maps afterwards, we can do that through here. We can set it up, or we can just do a manual through this USB here, and then now we can just click it out and pull it. So also in here we have our task handling. I like to have this on active here. So what that does is when we select a field, it automatically brings us to this task handling page to allow us to select a task, so that we just don't have to navigate through as many icons there as we're running through. And then this here, continue with current task, so that's just what's going to happen as we leave that boundary. So I like to leave it on continue with current task, and that allows us to, if we do leave that boundary and come back in, we can just continue on with what task we're running through. Otherwise we can have it pause and start as we leave, or automatically save and book the task. And then on here we also have an onboard counter, so if you don't want to run through the task, you can also just use these quick and simple calculators similar to what the Massey had there that Josh touched on. And we have up to 10 counters here that we can select on at the time, and then we just turn on the counter at the top and it'll start keeping track, or we can zero it out here and that'll reset it. And then underneath here is just giving us back to the implement selection, and then that's just so that we could, if we need to make any adjustments on our actual width there for our coverage mapping. So that takes us back to the home screen here. I think what we'll do here is we'll just touch on this software version here. So there was some issues previously with the WAS PRN issue, so this will tell us what the tractor software version is. Oh, sorry. So under the tractor here. So then we'll go to our little house with our wrench here, and then our tractor with our laptop, and this will tell us our software compound here. So that'll let us know what we're running for our version. So if we do call in, if we're having issues connecting to WAS, we'll need to know that software compound to know if you need an update. So we'll want to know that sooner than later, not that you get to the field on the first day and find out that we have to run an update. And then we'll take her back to the home screen here. So as well on your map icon here, so I like to use the widgets on here to set up our Vario guide, but we can also make some adjustments through our map. So if we blow our map up to full screen here, on the side here we can cycle through each wayline that we have. So if we want to just quickly select a different wayline that we have in the field, we can pull through there, as well as the nudge menu that we had on there. We can pull up and adjust our different waylines, and we can change these icons on the side here by just clicking on this map, and we can go to the plus to create a boundary, or to create a wayline or an obstacle or a marker there, as well as adjust our different mapping. So in this one here, we were talking about our different coverages, so we can make our coverage change as we go across for our mapping settings there. So then what we'll go ahead here is just go ahead and make a boundary and a wayline. So I'm just going to go ahead into our GPS screen here, go to our field menu, and then we're going to go ahead and create a boundary now that we have all our implements set. And we're just going to go ahead and select it on the recording here. We're going to check, and then we're going to pick which side of the implement we want to record off of. So we're going to go off of the right side here, and then we can have our recording option here. So we're just going to pull ahead here, and we'll begin recording here. And you can see in here that we'll have our recording start to preview there as we're going around our field here. And then if we were to need to square off a corner as we're kind of making our boundary here in our outside row, then what we'll do actually is we'll pause this icon here, and that pauses our boundary creation. So now we can go ahead and we can turn and back into our corner here without messing around with the boundary there. So as you can see there, that white line is just the snap point from where we left off to where we were to resume. So now we can go ahead and finish backing into our corner. And once we're backed in there, if we just hit resume, it's just going to connect our 2 points here and record. And then this prompt here just means that if we rolled backwards there, it would sense that we're changing direction. So it's just asking us if we want to keep it paused or not. So since we're going to keep rolling forward, we're not going to keep it paused or resume, and we're just going to resume it. So we're going to hit X on there. And now we're continuing our recording here. So as we run through, then we can finish recording as we kind of come up to our connection point where we started. So we'll just hit this black square here to complete our boundary. and it'll just connect those 2 points, and we can save it under the current field that we are running here. So we'll just call it field 2, and then now we have our field saved here. So then just to kind of show you how it would look like here, if we change our field to our field 1 and we leave this auto field detection here on, then what will happen is, you can see here we don't see our field in here. So if we drive outside our field boundary, if we roll up to the building here, and then just as we come in to approach where our field boundary will be, I don't think it will go far enough. We'll just make a little loop here. I believe here, oh sorry, so that was my bad here. We actually had her under the field there, so we just run through that field selection. So it's not showing it on here, but I think that's just because we don't have enough room here to drive outside the boundary. But what it'll actually look like here is it'll just pull up this field, and it'll automatically filter through to our task here right away afterwards. So then we can go ahead and we can say, if we're just entering the field for the first time, we can call it our planting task and recreate a task, and then we can go ahead and select that task. So even if we just call it a test there and hit check, then we'll have our task, and it just kind of cycles through so that we don't have to run through all our different menu options on the side here as we kind of run through. So that's kind of brief run through of our Vario Guide settings there. So we'll leave it to Rob here if there's any questions. Oh, to make a